There are interviews, and then there are moments that flip an entire relationship between nations in a single breath. What happened today wasn't normal politics, and it wasn't polite diplomacy. It was a tectonic shift. For the first time, Canadians heard something they were never supposed to hear. Mark Carney, usually calm, disciplined, and measured, finally dropped the filter. No coded language, no polite smiles, no carefully prepared diplomatic phrases. Just the raw truth about what it has really been like dealing with Donald Trump behind closed doors. This wasn't about policy disagreements or personality clashes. This was about the collapse of a 40-year trajectory between two countries that once considered each other unshakable partners. And in this interview, Carney didn't gently hint at the truth, he unleashed it. He exposed the ego games inside the Oval Office, the twisting of facts, the midnight all-caps messages, and the moment Trump openly fantasized about Canada becoming America's 51st state. But the most shocking part wasn't what Carney revealed about Trump. It was what he revealed about Canada, a country that has quietly decided it will no longer allow Washington's chaos to shape its destiny. And today, on national television, Mark Carney made that crystal clear. Carney didn't waste time painting a picture of the Oval Office that Canadians rarely imagine. He described a space where every sentence becomes a negotiation, where one wrong word can derail months of progress, and where the mood of one man can shift the fate of an entire country. He admitted that dealing with Trump required constant calculation, not because the policies were difficult, but because the ego was fragile. The reporter revealed a detail that said everything. Trump hates being called Donald, yet insists on calling Carney simply Mark. That imbalance isn't accidental. It's power politics, a subtle reminder of who believes he has the upper hand. Carney didn't sugarcoat what he witnessed. He said Trump twists data, mocks allies, and uses public humiliation as a strategic weapon. And in those meetings, Trump often drifted into domestic tangents that had nothing to do with Canada, reminding everyone that Canada's concerns were secondary in Trump's world. But Carney didn't break. He didn't bite back. He observed, absorbed, and waited. Because he knew something deeper. The real challenge wasn't the man in the room. It was the vision he carried. And that vision would soon reveal something far more shocking than anyone expected. But that wasn't even the beginning. Then came the moment that electrified the interview. Carney revealed a secret conversation from inside the Oval Office. Trump, half joking but half serious, floated the idea that Canada should be absorbed into the United States. It was said casually, but the intention wasn't casual at all. Carney didn't hesitate. He fired back with a firm, repeated rejection. Never, never, never. No diplomatic phrasing, no room for misinterpretation, no softened edges, just absolute clarity. Trump couldn't understand why a country with global admiration wouldn't want to join his vision of America. Carney reminded him that Canada's identity isn't up for negotiation. People around the world admire Canada because it isn't built on chaos, threats, or power trips, but on stability, law, and principle. Trump might have viewed Canada as an extension of his influence, but Carney made one thing clear. Canada's sovereignty is not a bargaining chip. And that single exchange became the quiet beginning of a national shift. Because Carney's next revelation showed how Trump's pressure had an unintended consequence. One he never saw coming. Carney revealed something extraordinary. Trump didn't divide Canada. In fact, he accidentally united it. Canadians, watching the chaos unfold south of the border, recognized something dangerous. America was no longer stable, predictable, or reliable. That external threat forced Canadians to reevaluate what truly mattered. People who disagreed on almost everything else agreed on one thing. Canada must never again be dependent on U.S. politics. Carney said he witnessed Canadians coming together with a level of unity rarely seen in modern times. They weren't rallying for a party. They were rallying for their identity, for their future, for protection from instability. This wasn't just a political moment. It was a cultural awakening. Canadians realized that the decisions coming from Washington were no longer consistent with their values or their safety. Trump pushed Canada towards self-reliance without ever intending to. And that shift became the foundation for what Carney explained next, something no Canadian leader had ever said this openly before. And what Carney said next would change everything. Carney said it with calm precision, the way someone delivers a truth that's been simmering for decades. Our relationship with the United States has fundamentally changed. This wasn't an opinion, it was a declaration. He explained that from the 1980s onward, Canada and the U.S. had been moving closer, economically, culturally, and politically. But that era is done. Trump's presidency didn't just disrupt the relationship. It ended the long-standing assumption that the U.S. would always be a stable partner. America changed the rules, unilaterally, unpredictably, and without explanation. And Canada had to adapt. Carney emphasized this wasn't about anger, it was about reality. Canada learned the dangers of being too tightly integrated with a country whose leadership can swing from calm to crisis overnight. Now, Canada isn't aiming for a good deal with the U.S. anymore. It wants a great one, if such a thing is even possible under current conditions. And Carney's next revelation about Trump's personal behavior only reinforced why distance became necessary. Because behind the scenes, things were even more chaotic than anyone imagined. Carney described something surreal. He and Trump moved their communication to text, and what came through his phone wasn't calm leadership. It was chaos. All caps, exclamation marks, random timing, late night, early morning, unpredictable bursts of emotion. Carney put it politely. It is not apparent how much the President of the United States sleeps. But the message was clear. Trump was operating from impulse, not strategy. This wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. When the leader of the world's most powerful nation sends volatile messages at 3 a.m., and those messages have international consequences, the world takes notice. Carney handled it diplomatically, but the more he revealed, the clearer it became why Canada could never again anchor its future to Washington's mood swings. And yet, even with the noise coming from the U.S., Carney noticed something powerful happening at home. Something that would form the foundation of Canada's future. But the biggest shift was still coming. This was the heart of Carney's message. He revealed the foundational shift in Canada's national strategy, a shift that had quietly begun and was now being spoken aloud. Canada will take matters into its own hands. He explained the truth bluntly. The U.S. hits fast with pressure, tariffs, and threats. But Canada builds slowly and permanently. Homes, transit, culture, energy, technology. Canada no longer aims to be America's auxiliary builder or its safety net. It aims to be self-reliant. Carney said Canadians now believe something profound. We can give ourselves more than the Americans can take away. This wasn't just a policy shift. It was a mindset shift, a cultural pivot, a declaration of identity. Canada would focus on building and expanding what makes it strong, without waiting for permission or partnership. And that shift led Carney to reveal something even larger, something that would define the next era of Canadian leadership. What Carney said next revealed the new future Canada is preparing for. Carney framed the future in simple terms. The old world is gone. The automatic trust, automatic alignment, automatic dependency, that's over. Canada will no longer allow American instability to decide Canadian policy. Instead, Canada will build a diversified global network of partners. It will focus on protecting supply chains, securing local manufacturing, and investing in long-term resilience instead of short-term deals. Carney's doctrine is grounded in a fundamental idea: Canada must never again be vulnerable to another nation's political chaos. This isn't anti-American. It's pro-Canadian. It's about survival. It's about maturity. It's about stepping into global leadership with confidence instead of fear. And Carney delivered this message, not with anger, but with clarity. Canada isn't running away from the U.S. It's growing beyond it. The relationship will continue, but on equal footing, without dependence, without blind trust, without illusions. And then Carney delivered the final blow. By the time Carney reached the final stretch of the interview, something had shifted. His tone wasn't defensive, or angry, or even frustrated anymore. It was calm, steady, almost relieved, like a leader finally saying out loud what he had been forced to whisper for years. Carney made it unmistakably clear: Canada's destiny will not be shaped by the chaos, volatility, or unpredictability coming from Washington. Not anymore. He explained that Canadians had already made their decision long before this interview happened. They looked south, saw a country tearing itself apart, saw division replacing unity, saw instability replacing order, and understood a harsh truth: tying Canada's future to a nation in turmoil would be a slow-motion disaster. Carney said Canadians chose something different: self-reliance, stability, and sovereignty. He didn't frame it as a rejection of America. He framed it as a realization that Canada has grown beyond the old patterns. Canada isn't a junior partner, a backup plan, or a safety valve for another country's political storms. It is a mature nation with its own priorities, its own values, and its own long-term goals. Carney emphasized that Canada is ready to build for itself, invest in itself, and trust itself. The era of waiting for U.S. approval is finished. The era of designing Canadian policy around American emotions is over. The era of hoping for stability from a neighbor trapped in perpetual crisis has ended. He said Canada will still work with America, but not depend on it, not fear it, not bend to it. And with that, he delivered the clearest message of the entire interview: Canada's future belongs entirely to Canada. The partnership may continue, but the dependence is dead. And for the first time in decades, Canadians finally understand the strength they've had all along. In the end, this interview wasn't just a political moment or a sharp exchange between two leaders. It was a turning point. A moment when the quiet truths that had been building inside Canada finally spilled into the open. Mark Carney didn't raise his voice. He didn't attack. He didn't dramatize. But the clarity with which he spoke carried more weight than any outrage ever could. He revealed the reality behind years of tension, pressure, and unpredictable leadership coming from the United States. And he did it with the calm confidence of someone who understands that the world has changed, and Canada must change with it. Carney showed Canadians exactly why the old model, relying on U.S. stability, U.S. leadership, U.S. predictability, no longer works. He pulled back the curtain on the late-night messages, the ego-driven negotiations, the fantasies of absorbing Canada, and the casual disrespect that defined Trump's approach. But more importantly, Carney explained how Canada responded, not with fear, not with submission, but with unity, maturity, and a renewed understanding of its own strength. This was never about Canada turning its back on America. It was about Canada refusing to let chaos define its path. It was about recognizing that a nation built on principle, law, and long-term vision cannot tie its future to a country lurching from crisis to crisis. Carney didn't offer slogans. He offered a map, a direction, a reminder that Canadians are capable of building more for themselves than any foreign power can take away. And that is the message that will echo far beyond this interview. Canada's identity is not fragile, and its future is not dependent. It is chosen, built, and protected by Canadians themselves. As this new chapter begins, one thing is clear. Canada isn't stepping back. Canada is stepping forward, and the world is finally noticing.